Good day, afternoon, evening, or night, friends. My name is Justin Waterfield. I work at Long McQuade at the flagship store in Toronto. Spending the next few minutes with you talking about guitar pedals. Now, we are living in the golden age of music gear. There's all sorts of vintage reissues and modern interpretations of classic and timeless designs and sounds. One company doing both those things very, very well is a company called Maestro. Now, even if you've never heard of the brand Maestro, you have definitely heard a Maestro product, and you're going to hear them right now. Let's check them out. The Maestro brand started in 1962. They made a couple of different products at the time. They used to make accordions. They made accordion amplifiers, if you can believe that. That was actually a thing back then. But the most famous thing that they made was an effect called the Echoplex. Now, guitar players will know this because it's so closely identified with Jimmy Page and Tom Scholz of Boston, and a number of other famous players of the day. This was a portable tape machine that would record your guitar signal going in and then loop it back to you at whatever interval. And this was really the genesis for what we know today as a delay pedal. But back in the day, they didn't have a small little circuit that could do that. It had to be this big old tape machine. A little bit later on, Maestro invented the FZ-M Fuzz-Tone. Now, this was and is considered, generally considered the first dedicated guitar pedal. So it had an input for your guitar, it had an output to your amp, it had a couple of knobs on it, and a foot switch to turn it on and off. Now, the original design intention of this pedal was to emulate the horn section of a band, so that when you played through it in a guitar, it kind of sounded like a bunch of trumpets and saxophones. Wasn't really the case. So the pedal didn't do well initially until Keith Richards used it on the Rolling Stones song Satisfaction. And that's that riff that we all know and love. That's the sound of that pedal. And of course, from there, things exploded. Over the next couple of decades, some new designers were brought in to refine and develop new designs. Two of these designers, you synth guys out there will know these names, Bob Moog and Tom Oberheim, the two giants of synthesizers, right? Now, the Oberheim era is probably the best known for the designs that Tom Oberheim himself came up with. He came up with the RM1 ring modulator, and perhaps better known is the PH1 phase shifter. This is a great guitar effect, but it's also a great keyboard effect. So John Paul Jones from Led Zeppelin is seen playing his Fender Rhodes through this on a lot of the live Led Zeppelin footage. And he has it right up on the lid of his Rhodes. It's this big box. It's got 3 switches on it for slow, medium, fast speeds. And he played it on No Quarter, that great song with that great sort of moody piano, and that gives it that bubbly kind of underwater sound. That's the PH1 phase shifter. Unfortunately, the Maestro brand closed up in 1979, just before the pedal world really took off, and haven't done much since, until today. Now right here, I just want to pause and talk about the Gibson brand as a whole. Now Gibson is under new management, they have been for a number of years, and they've really turned the company around. They've been doing some amazing things. And the reason for this, I feel, is because they're acknowledging what has made their products such classics in the past, but still making them relevant to players and collectors and musicians and everything today. And that's such a fine line to walk, to be vintage correct and to have all the classic stuff that people lust after. You know, the Jimmy Pages, the Joe Walshes, the Joe Perrys, right, the Slash, all those great sort of, you know, Gibson players of yesteryear, but still giving them something that sounds good and sounds modern and up to date and fresh. That's a really, really tough thing to do. But Gibson has done it, and Gibson's done it with the Epiphone brand, and they've done it here with these Maestro pedals. And without further ado, let's start talking about these. I got the new Fuzz-Tone, the FZ-M, right here in its box. We're going to do an unboxing and check it out. All right, so very nice packaging right there. We get the Maestro brand all over it. We get this nice kind of vintage textured paper box, which is really lovely. There we go. Whoop. So we have a little user manual right there and a sticker. Let's face it, we all love getting stickers with our pedals, so that's a cool addition. There we go. And here it is. So what we're getting here is a, you know, good solid metal enclosure. We have top-mounted jacks, input, output, and power. The clicky true bypass switch. All of these pedals are going to be the 3-knob format. They also have an extra little switch in there that will do a couple of different things depending on which model it is. It can give you a modern or classic voicing or like an alternate voicing, or it can bring in some extra features, and that we'll take a look at in a second. This, I have to show you, the LED, the status LED. So check this out, I'm going to show you on this one here. When you click it on, the logo lights up. This is so cool. The bugles here, I didn't know these were bugles, I only found out during my research, but that's what this is. It draws attention to the Maestro branding, but it still serves a function. This is just so cool. So I'm going to go ahead and add this Fuzz-Tone into the chain here. There we go. So what we have here is a setup of 5 pedals, right? This is their current lineup. We have the Fuzz, we have a Overdrive, we have a Distortion, we have a Comet Chorus, and then we have the Discoverer Delay. And word has it that there are more on the way. But for today, let's just stick to what's in front of us, all right? So I'm just going to grab my Les Paul here. So the signal chain, I should tell you right off the bat, this is my personal Les Paul. It's my 58 reissue. I have some vintage PAF style humbuckers. They're Alnico 5s, if any of you are curious, going into a Trainer YGL2. Now, for the most part, I'm going to be playing on the clean channel. It is set up to right on the edge of breakup. I have the bright switch in. I just prefer it that way with humbuckers. We are going to be switching to the overdrive channel for a couple of things to check out some different ways to voice these pedals. So let's start off with the one everyone wants to know about, the Fuzz-Tone FZ-M. Now this is not a one-to-one vintage reissue. This is a modern reworking of the classic Fuzz-Tone circuit with the same voicing as the original. So here we have controls for attack, which is your gain level. You have the tone, and then you have just the level control, which is the output volume. The switch on this goes from classic voicing, so exactly like the original FZ1, and then it goes into a modern voicing. So what you're going to hear in that setting is a little bit tamer treble and a little bit more mid-push. Now the FZ-M like the original FZ-1, has a very, very nasal sound to it. It's very mid-rangey, cuts off a lot of bottom end. It's almost like a really fuzzy treble booster. Now, the reason for this is because modern amps are a lot brighter than they used to be. Vintage amps were actually very full and very thick and very bassy, and depending who you ask, very muddy. So the way that a lot of those early players, people like Eric Clapton used to get grind out of those amps was to put like a treble booster or like a really bright kind of aggressive fuzz through it, and that would push the tubes into overdrive. So that's really what they've tried to capture here. So if you have an amp that has like a bright switch or something like that, or like a bright or a normal input, in the classic mode, you're probably going to want to go into the normal or the non-bright channel. In the modern mode, because it's got more mid-range, a little bit fuller sound, you can probably go into your bright channel. But we'll check out a couple of different combinations here. All right, let's get started. My guitar has the volume and the tone controls all the way up. The pedal controls are at noon, and then I'll show you the sweep, like the range that these controls have, and then we're going to flick into the modern setting and check that out. So here we go. Here's the clean sound. And here is the FZ-M. So, total swarm of bees kind of tone, right? It's so aggressive. So going into an amp with a bright channel, it's to everybody's taste. But watch this. When I turn off the bright channel, it's going to sound totally different. Right? So that brightness that you initially heard when we had the bright switch in, now that I took it out, that brightness from the pedal is just giving so much more definition to this particular fuzz circuit. Now, fuzzes, as we know them today, are generally very full and very woofy and very bassy and full frequencied. And there's so much compression and just like squashing of the signal there. This is a refreshing take on fuzz because it's so bright, because it's so aggressive, and because there's so much string-to-string definition. You can hear every note in the chord. So let's switch into the distortion channel on this amp, and let's see what this brightness can do. All right, so here is the overdrive channel. Now let's kick in that fuzz. Right? So it just cleans up all those strings, and you can hear it, like every note in that chord just pops out. While at the same time, it almost sounds like it's collapsing on itself. It's getting into a little bit of like gated territory. Very, very cool. Very nicely voiced pedal. So let's flip back to the normal channel here. And let's check out the range of these knobs. right, so everything back at noon. Let's check out that modern voicing. Here we go. And just for fun, let's switch back to the Overdrive channel and feed it this modern setting and see what it does. Very, very cool. Very vintage, but also very aggressive. All right. Switch back to the clean channel, kick in that bright switch. And now we're back to square one. Let's talk about the Ranger Overdrive. This is a very classic, sort of mild to medium distortion pedal. It's got a lot of volume on tap for boosting your amp if you want to use it as a clean booster. The controls here are gain, how much distortion you want, tone, so how bright or dark you want the circuit, and the level control, self-explanatory. The switch on this one goes between high and low settings. So the low setting is the milder of the two. It's very organic, very touch-sensitive gain. And the high setting, to my ears, boosts the mid-range quite a bit, but it also increases the gain quite a bit. Now, this is a very dynamic pedal. It really, you can really push it and dial it back without even touching the pedal. You can almost sort of just leave it on, sort of set it and forget it. And this can be going into a very clean amp, you know, like a very dynamic kind of distortion or overdrive. So let's see how this sounds. All right, let's hear that high voicing. What I like about this is that it's not a huge personality change when you flick from one setting to the other. It's almost like the high setting picks up from when the low setting leaves off. Let's now check out the sweep of these controls and see what kind of sounds we can get. So we're going to go back onto the low setting. Let's keep everything at noon and go from there. All right, back at noon, we're going to try the high setting. All right, so I want you guys to notice something I did there. This is on the high gain setting at maximum gain, and it still cleans up. I just rolled back the volume on my guitar, probably about, what, 3 or 4, and this pedal cleaned up so nicely. This is a great set it and forget it pedal. Something this dynamic, this is a really special circuit. You're gonna like this one. All right, moving on. This is the Invader Distortion pedal. This is super high gain. It's got kind of a spongy feel to it. It's got scooped mids. It's got a nice big bass frequencies in there. The tone control I find is really interesting because on a lot of pedals, the tone control basically just sweeps from like really muffled to really bright. But what this tone control feels like it's doing is it's just rolling off the top end and leaving the bass frequencies alone, which is really helpful for a pedal like this. So here we have controls for gain, we have tone, and we have level. Pretty self-explanatory, but check this out. The switch here controls a noise gate that's built into the pedal. This should be on all high gain pedals as far as I'm concerned, especially when you're playing something like this at loud volumes. The feedback can get a bit much. Sometimes you want like, a little bit tighter rhythm sound. This is going to get you there. In addition to this noise gate, there's an internal trim pot inside the pedal. So when you open it up to change the battery or what have you, you can adjust it with a little mini screwdriver how like where you want that threshold and how fast you want this thing to cut off the sound when your signal drops below a certain level. Super useful. So for this, I'm going to switch off the bright switch. And let's see what this thing's about. Again, I'm going to be on the bridge pickup again for this one. All right, since there's no alternate voicing for this, let's just go ahead and move these knobs and see what other tones we can get out of this. All right, let's flip that bright switch back on. And now we have the Comet Chorus next up on the list. This is a really interestingly voiced chorus. I kind of like it. It's not a chorus like we're used to these days. A lot of the sort of slow, subtle, sexy 80s choruses are coming back. This is not like that. This is very obvious. It's got a very obvious throb to it. It almost sounds like a univibe or a vibrato pedal or something like that. The controls on here are depth, which is how much you want your pitch to modulate over time. The mix control, so it's dry and wet mix. And the speed, so how fast or how slow you want your pitch to modulate over time. The mix control is kind of interesting too because, and I may be totally wrong, my ears may be telling me lies, but it never seems like the mix control goes fully wet. It feels like there's still a little bit of dry signal in there, but I may be wrong. I may be just hearing it differently. Now the switch on this has two settings, Earth mode and Orbit mode. So in Earth setting, it's just a normal chorus or modulation, pitch modulation pedal. On the Orbit setting, you get a tremolo effect that comes in time with the modulation. So what this is doing is it's dipping the volume whenever the LFO wave cycle dips, right? So it kind of gives you a little bit of a Leslie or rotating speaker kind of vibe. It can be fairly subtle, but it gets way more pronounced when the depth is all the way up, and you'll see what I mean. So I'm going to switch over to the neck pickup. There's our clean tone. Let's fire it up. And let's just go ahead and play with those knobs and see what we get. Setting. Let's return everything to noon o'clock and flick it on. Cool. So you see what I mean? Very, very unique voicing for this pedal. And that's exactly what I was talking about going into this section of the video, is like they're doing something a little bit different, right? They didn't just make a chorus pedal, they made the Maestro chorus pedal. It's not phaser or flanger or straight chorus or univibe. It's a collection of all those things with the tremolo thrown in for good measure. Now, I should say about the tremolo feature on the orbit setting, there is an internal trim pot on this as well, where you can adjust the depth of the tremolo effect when you flick it on. And last on our journey, we come to our delay pedal. This is the Discoverer delay. This is really, really nice. Analog delay. It's got BBD chips, so the repeats are nice and dirty and crunchy. It almost reminds me of what I think of a real Echoplex would be, this sort of crunchy, dirty, not very well defined repeats. I kind of like that for a delay. It sits back in the mix and leaves your dry tone alone, and it just fills out the space, especially when you're doing single note runs. It's very, very useful for filling up the space, especially if you don't have another guitar player or something doing the rhythm there. So on this, we have controls for delay, which is the amount of time it's going to take between your dry signal and the repeat coming back at you. So it can go from very, very quick to like a slapback delay, almost like if you were singing in the shower. And it can go right up to the sort of David Gilmour-esque, like play a note, you wait a bit, then it comes back at you, like you're playing out into a canyon or something like that. There's the mix control, which is your dry-wet mix, and the sustain control. Now, the sustain, basically sets a number of repeats that you get. So you can have it down just to one repeat right back at you, or you can have it sort of trail off into infinity. And what this will do, because it's an analog delay, is it will start self-oscillating at maximum sustain settings, where the signal will basically feed back into itself and get all crazy and Radiohead. You're going to see what I mean. I'm going to do that for you a little bit later. But let's put these controls at noon and see what this sounds like. Okay, so I want to do something here. I'm going to crank the mix all the way to the wet side. Now listen, this is just going to be the repeats. Listen to the quality of these repeats. Right? So what you're hearing is just this like natural just breakup of the repeats themselves. Is just so dirty, and that's, again, in my mind, the sound of a tape machine. Now, speaking of tape machines, the switch on this controls a modulation feature. This, in some settings, it can sound like the Comet Chorus on some settings. What this is going to do is it's going to add pitch modulation to the repeats only. The purpose of this is to give you a little bit more of a tape machine kind of sound. So these, Maestro echoplexes that we were talking about earlier, over time the tape would stretch and it would, not go through properly, or it would get all crumpled up or whatever, and give you imperfections in those repeats. And that's what this modulation is trying to do, just add a little bit more movement, I guess, to those repeats. So let's twist some knobs and see what we can get out of this thing. So now I'm going to show you what this self-oscillation business is all about. I'm basically going to dime all the controls. I'm going to put the delay and the sustain up to maximum. I'm going to play a chord, and you're going to hear it just basically fold back on itself and mutate into this whole other thing. This is really cool. That is just so much fun. It's instant Radiohead. I love it. And there we go. That is the new lineup of pedals from the revived Maestro brand. You got your fuzz, you got your overdrive, you got your distortion, your chorus, and your delay. The staples. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join me on this video. We really appreciate it. Give the video a like if you liked it. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you liked. Let us know if you'd like to see more of this kind of content. We love doing this stuff for you. Let us know what you'd like to see more of. Let's have this be a conversation. And as always, let us know if there's any questions, anything we can clear up for you. Head down to your local Long McQuade. Get your hands on some of these pedals. You will not be disappointed. These are really, really unique pedals. They're definitely worth a shot. Until next time, my name is Justin. Thank you again, everyone. See you later.